And so, the final batch of DLC for Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 is about to be fully begun. Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Maxi here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog, or most people call it Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 for the Xbox 360/PlayStation 3. So, last time, we essentially did manage to finish up everything for the sake of the forms of Boss Attack Silver, even though much like the forms of how it does it in Boss Attack Sonic though, we did somehow manage to achieve an A rank, although unlike in Shadow's Boss Attack though, that we did somehow achieve the glorious S rank. But apart from those side things though, we did that particular mode okay enough, even though despite the fact that I accidentally died from the very start of the forms of this entire DLC for Boss Attack Silver, mainly because of this weird camera angle, and on top of that, we didn't get ourselves a rings to start off with. So because of that though, yeah, as I mentioned this before, is about the fact that I found that particular DLC okay enough in terms of the forms of the majority of the boss attack stuff. And of course, you can able to actually go back onto the forms of the boss attacks as well as the forms of Team Attack Amigos if you want to desire to able to go for that stuff by going onto the forms of Act Trial if you wanted to, but that's not the reason why we're going to be able to go into Act Trial for the sake of the forms of this particular point, because today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present you the whole marathon of the remaining parts, because obviously we're about to be fully begin very hard mode in terms of every single stages of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, just to know how the actual comparison when it comes to specific level design actually plays out to be, specifically in very hard mode. So because of that though, I know technically we were supposed to be able to also show off hard mode. I mean, let's face it though, hard mode is basically identical to normal mode, except the noticeable differences being is that they added in too many enemies on screen, and on top of that, some tricky platforming skills, and not to mention though, several stage hazards included. So because of that, now I'm pretty sure about the fact that in order to able to get the S rank on hard mode, is that it feels very similar to normal mode, where basically you have to able to get about 50,000 points. Well, unlike the forms of how it does it on very hard mode on the other hand, well, as you can tell about the fact that this is going to be the post-commentary for the majority of the forms of the very hard mode, during the forms within the actual entire DLC, although obviously much like the forms of how it does it on not only Team Attack Amigo, but also with the forms of boss attacks when it comes to like Sonics, Shadows, and Silvers. Basically though, the very hard missions are purchased separately. So because of that though, and as I mentioned this before, this is going to be the final batch of those particular DLC we'd like to show off, because as a result, I'm up for the challenge, especially noticeable ever since in Sonic Unleashed, and as a result, I'm going to be able to be optimistic about this. Even though I was attempting to originally do the super hard mode playthrough in Sonic Heroes, as well as expert mode on Shadow the Hedgehog. Well, honestly, I don't feel like I was able to try to tackle for those just yet. Because no matter what though, it's about the fact that, yes, what I've heard anyway, is about the fact that there's a lot of rumors going on in terms of Sonic Heroes Remake, which, as a result, we have no idea when that's going to happen at some form or another. But let's just not cut to the chase when it comes to likely mention something like rumors and leaks alike. So, as a result, nothing else to really add for this point. So, as you can tell, about the fact that we are still going to be able to be playing through several characters at one point, during the forms of some stages anyway though. But as you can see, in Wave Ocean, in very hard mode, as you can see, we're about to be traversing into the entire stage in backwards. So, yeah, that seems pretty interesting though. Although, we might still able to come across into Mark Speed sections every once in a while, between with the forms of not only for Wave Ocean, but also with Crisis City, Radical Train, and of course, Kingdom Valley. So, as a result, technically speaking though, until when it gets to the point during the forms within this Friday coming up, obviously, no matter what though, that'll be the true definition of the final time we're going to be seeing the Mark Speed sections in action. Because no matter what though, I feel like that the Mark Speed sections is alright enough, but it's just about the fact that it can really get a bit more frustrating, which as a result, because the forms of that particular well, you know what I'm talking about, especially noticeable because I've heard several of issues in intensity forms in the Mark Speed sections in general, which as a result, thankfully they did somehow, or someone out there, specifically Chaos X, did somehow manage able to fix a lot of issues for the sake of the forms of the Mark Speed sections, thanks to the forms of Sonic Project 06. So because of this though, yeah, you probably get the idea for this point. So, and speaking of traversing onto several stages in backwards though, I think it only happens in Journey forms of being in Sonic's case. To be more specifically, right now we ended up in Wave Ocean, which I have already mentioned about this earlier, with traversing into the actual level in backwards. Well, not so much on this point right here, because obviously after going from jumping from rock to rock, basically though, I highly recommend you're able to use the actual red gem on this part, because otherwise the actual dolphins, or yeah, just dolphins in general, they did somehow manage to catch up to you very, very fast, and as a result, no matter what though, if you mess up at least one form or another, then obviously you will say goodbye to your ridiculous amount of points you're going to be gathering, and as a result, no matter what though, similar to the forms of how it does it on, well, not only on normal mode, but also on hard mode as well, that basically though, if you didn't get the S rank run, then obviously you have to restart, which, as a result, for this particular run-through, I don't think it's going to be possible for me to able to actually get every single S ranks on this run, because obviously, they're just for bragging rights, and not to mention though, is about the fact that there's nothing right to hum about. So, yeah, as a result, about the fact that I'm pretty sure the Mark Speed section is pretty much unchanged, well, aside from the forms of different placements when it comes to likely not only for several obstacles, but also with enemy placements, and still the hitbox is still pretty big for what I've noticed anyway. So, relatively speaking though, is about the fact that I very appreciate that we've almost done every single Mark Speed sections in Journey forms within this entire game, because no matter what though, I'm just really looking forward to able to finishing this game up completely before we move on to the next Sonic Let's Play that needs to be redo and stuff like that in the future. Just because no matter what though, you know, with Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is almost approaching, so although I still say it's going to be coming in Drain at some point in this fall, so yeah, you probably get the idea how much I was excited for that particular upcoming remaster of Sonic Generations, because I just simply love playing that game so much, either on the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3 versions most likely. So because of that though, yeah, you probably get the idea for this point right here. So, now as you can tell about the fact that I've decided able to edit out the loading times, because let's face it though, I feel like the loading screens every now and then is gonna get a lot boring now. Especially noticeable, not only it just wastes time, but it's also about the fact that there's nothing else going on, aside from the forms of that brief instructions to know the actual main mechanics worked. So because of that though, yeah, for the majority of the forms of the very hard mode parts, I've decided to edit out the loading times this time around, just because I know for a fact that a lot of players out there are getting a lot more impatient for able to get the thing move along, which is understandably so, especially noticeable it doesn't help about the fact that the PlayStation 3 version does not reduce the loading time seconds, so unlike in the Xbox 360 version does that, whilst compared to the PlayStation 3 version, sadly doesn't. So because of that though, now for what I've heard anyway, it's about the fact that when it comes to the forms of the lack of trophies in this game, not only that this was the only PlayStation 3 game that is pretty much lacking in trophy support, but that also applies to the forms of not only Sega Superstars Tennis, but also with the forms of Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit, which as a result, speaking of Dragon Ball Z though, is about the fact that, do you guys even believe about the fact that in terms of the forms of the actual most popular Dragon Ball Z games at the time, that I can't believe by saying this is about the fact that not counting the forms of Super Butoden 2, but from everywhere else around the world, to be more specifically when it comes to specific releases of Dragon Ball Z games, that it's been like almost like 20 years ago since when Bean Struggles did somehow introduce specifically for any other Dragon Ball Z fighting games for the Western releases. Like, it all started ever since in Journey forms of, let's just say, back in Budokai 3, or anything else like that. Mind you, it's been a very long while since I actually have managed to research on specific stuff like this. And no matter what though, it's about the fact that I think, relatively speaking, it's about the fact that at some point in the future, I'm also able to try to get myself the PlayStation 3 version of Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit, because I was originally trying to able to go for the Xbox 360 version again, but I've decided able to change my mind and able to actually go for the PlayStation 3 version instead, because what I've heard is about the fact that it plays pretty similar to Budokai games, except the fact that the actual main gimmick of, or the main mechanic of Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit is all about drama pieces, where if you insert specific drama pieces, that actually triggers something. So, yeah, you probably get the idea of what I'm talking about right here, so exponentially speaking though, I can essentially try to go for that. Plus, what I've heard anyway, that whenever I double check on the vaults of the difficulty rating for the majority of the achievements list on the Xbox 360 version of Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit, my god, it was 9 out of 10 difficulty, for I've noticed that anyway. So, yeah, that's essentially the reason why I'm attempting to be aiming for the PlayStation 3 version now, just because I feel like that might be the better solution in my part. So, thus, it's been a very long time since I actually have last brought something for the PlayStation 3, ever since in Sega Superstars Tennis, what I've noticed anyway. So, yeah, that's why I was essentially going to be able to explain any of that. So, anyway, and as you can see, since we're now onto Dusty Desert right now, mind you, we're almost nearly at the end of this stage, as you can see, we are no longer going to be carrying Princess Elise by the end of the level, which as a result it makes the entire stage a lot interesting without Princess Elise in mind. Although, despite the fact that the actual game encourages you to be able to pull off some very difficult movesets and what have you, which as a result, there might be a couple of times that I somehow use one of my gems, so that way I can able to easily manage to win through certain sections no problem, even though despite the fact that the gem system for Sonic in this game is ridiculously broken. Like, again, no limited power, so because of that though, it is very unlimited for the most part. So because of this though, and in addition to about that, it's about the fact that for I can gather, there is that only one time you're going to be able to be playing as Sonic carrying Princess Elise the whole way through, was, I think it's still going to be applied into Tropical Jungle. And speaking of Tropical Jungle though, again, we should probably explain more about it if we get onto at some point in this Friday coming up. Because as far as I'm aware, yes indeed, it's about the fact that, well, today's date of course is the 3rd of April today, in some cases in 2024 today. So potentially speaking though, is about the fact that, for I've heard anyway, according to the forms of in the game shop and stuff like that, well, it looks like we've got exactly 50 days to go until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake is going to be coming onto the Nintendo Switch. Still, I'm very excited for it, even though I will admit though right away, we still have no idea of any additional content they're able to bring. Well, aside from the fact that, for what I've heard anyway, a lot of Nintendo fans get a little bit worried about the fact that it might not contain additional content or anything else like that. Although it's a bit difficult to explain about this just yet though, just because we're still in April after all. I mean, mind you about the fact that, like I said earlier, we've only got exactly 50 days left until this amazing, incredible Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake is coming. So because of that though, still I'm very excited for it, as I mentioned this before. And as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that I believe we've only got about 85 days to go until Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is going to be releasing on Switch. And finally, most notably, I think we've only got about 83 days left until Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble is expecting to be releasing. So because of that though, I think around that time though is about the fact that, well, usually relatively speaking though, it's a great thing about the fact that we've almost catching up onto finishing the rest of the Super Monkey Ball game series up to this point. So there might be plenty of time about the fact that we can probably able to tackle through the next Super Monkey Ball game. Maybe at some point in the future though, but not now anyway though, just because not only about the fact that, and during that specific point until tomorrow, that Coco Bandicoot, that she's almost finishing up everything for Klonoa Fantasy Referee series, like as a result that she's only got the last few extra bits of content for the majority of Klonoa 2, Lunity's Veil portion of the forms of, Klonoa Fantasy Referee series up to that point. So yeah, you get the idea of why I was trying to explain about that. So as you can see, I did somehow manage to pull off a pretty broken shortcut, by the way, by simply able to utilize with the purple gem. Although this is not what it meant supposed to be doing, but I'm just going to show you something that is a little bit unbelievable, which as a result, if you manage to skip the Tails portion of this particular stage right here, basically though, as soon as you're able to get to this point way more earlier than it's expecting, basically if you come towards over here, and as you can tell, after we're doing with this robot right here, as you see, there's a double Gengar Sonic right over there, right where the checkpoint was. Even though despite the fact that I did not meant to activate that particular checkpoint right there, that's just probably because I didn't pay attention to that whatsoever. So, oh well, no big deal though, especially noticeable because obviously I just don't want to get myself wrecked all the time when it comes to likely for its enemy encounters alongside with the forms of the level design alterations. So, I mean, for the most part though, is about the fact that the majority of the entire portion of very hard mode is that you're going to be spending most of your time trying to actually destroy all these Eggman robots, as you can tell. Especially noticeable because in order to get the glorious S rank in any other very hard mode for the majority of the stages in this entire DLC, is that you're essentially going to be able to try to aim for the double amount compared to the forms of how it does it for the sake of the 50,000 points, unlike in normal mode and hard mode. Well, in very hard mode, you have to aim for 100,000 points. So, that seems pretty ridiculous kind of thing about it though. Although, I highly suggest you're able to recommend trying to save up some specific amount of rings you're going to be collecting. To be more specifically, the yellow gem is going to be your best friend indeed. Especially noticeable because if you carry so many rings with you, that way it does give you a whole bunch of ring bonuses, which as a result, that'll be pretty useful as far as I'm usually concerned with that stuff. Mind you, no matter what though, is about the fact that I believe if you do manage to try to complete the very hard missions in journey forms of some stages anyway though, I believe you don't get anything if you manage to complete them all, because obviously they're just there for the sake of bragging rights, especially noticeable unless if you really want to try the entire DLC for yourself, which as a result, again, we should probably get into more details about the forms of other pieces of DLC in terms of very hard missions until for later, because for now we are moving on to Crisis City, where I believe Crisis City is for the most part is unchanged, well, aside from, again, enemy placements and all that stuff. But there are some little differences I would like to point things out, is that as soon as we get into the second section, alongside with the forms of the third segment, something change is about to happen, which as a result, yeah, as you can tell, I'm feeling very lucky when it comes to getting onto rails this time, even though, again, why can they just able to actually bring in, like, orange ramps, just like the forms of how it does it not only in Sonic Adventure, but also in Sonic Adventure 2, but then again, this game right here is rushed as it is. So either way though, and also unfinished mess, as far as I'm usually concerned with that stuff. So either way, and as far as I'm aware, yes, Spike Balls has now been addressed, so just to ensure we need to build up the actual pressure of the jump, so just to ensure about the fact that you can easily try to able to avoid certain spike balls, if you will. So generally speaking, that was about the fact that, yeah, as far as I can gather, that on the second segment right here, rather than just going into the forms of the rail grinding section there, so instead we immediately bump into specific enemy encounters while simply trying to able to do a skydiving part right here. So despite the fact that, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that Sonic's the actual posing is a little bit, well, it's a bit tricky to explain because I know for a fact it's been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, since in Boss Attack Silver and stuff like that. So generally speaking, everything else will be pretty much accounted for. So anyways, so there are quite a few things I would like to mention about in terms of the forms of news, discussions alike. That's what appears to be about the fact that I believe, fundamentally speaking though, aside from the fact that I've already mentioned about the forms of that specific days left, in terms of the forms of some games coming out for it, As it turns out, is about the fact that one thing I totally forgot to mention about, since Injury Forms have been Boss Attack Silver DLC, and that's what appears to be about the fact that I can't even believe by saying this, it's been 1 year ago since when the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog did somehow first came out on PC Steam, and as a result, yeah, while looking back on it right now, despite the fact that I still haven't experienced that game yet though, that's just mainly because, well, obviously I still haven't exactly able to actually access to PC Steam, that's just mainly because I'm not exactly a pure PC gamer. Well, I used to, specifically when I did manage to able to play both of those games in the past, ranging from Donald Duck Quack Attack, which every now and then I've got the PlayStation 2 version right now. To be more specifically, that is usually still got downloaded onto my PlayStation 3. Even though I will admit though right away, I haven't exactly touched upon the PlayStation 2 version as much compared to the PC version, which as a result, because of the fonts of not only for its updated visuals, for I've heard anyway, but also with the fonts of the UI is actually a lot different compared to the fonts of how it does it on multiple versions of Donald Duck's Quack Attack game, which as a result, yeah, it plays pretty similar to Crash Bandicoot, except the fact that obviously it's made for targeted audiences for kids anyway, which as a result, understandably so. And also, I do remember playing A Bug's Life on PC as well, although I was expecting to try to get the PlayStation 1 version of A Bug's Life so I can able to actually refresh my memories again. Although, to be fair though, it's been a very long time since I actually have last played that game, potentially speaking. Although, I was expecting to try to get the N64 version, but it's not gonna happen, mainly because about the fact that at some point in the future, I might try to able to get myself the Rayman 2 The Great Escape on the N64 version, just to ensure to able to celebrate the, well, obviously the 25th anniversary of Rayman 2 The Great Escape in general, although there is one in particular version, well actually gonna think about it, two versions I'm probably not gonna get for Rayman 2 The Great Escape, and those are the DS version alongside with the fonts of the PC version as well, just because like I said earlier, I'm not exactly a PC gamer anymore, just because no matter what though, I'm pretty much used to playing games on not only on consoles but also on hybrids between both console and handheld. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. And as you can see on Crisis City right there on the third section right here, it looks like this particular tornado section did somehow gets a lot more lengthier, which as a result I was not expecting to see how that particular level length did somehow address that. Well, mind you about the fact it only lasted for about a few seconds notice, because obviously as soon as we launch ourselves into the most infamous Mark Speed section in this entire whole game, which means yet again we must avoid not only cars but also a lot of hazards as well, like box crates and all that stuff, which as a result, luckily, for those of you probably wondering about the fact that I was assuming if I was going to able to screw up so many times, well luckily though, for me though, is about the fact that since no matter what though, thankfully the actual hitbox, alongside with the fonts of the invincibility frames, did manage to help me for a little bit. So no matter what though, about the fact that maybe it's a possibility that this might be actually be my best run when it comes to likely experiencing very hard mode in Crisis City. Because no matter what though, whenever I'm actually able to keep playing this stage on hard mode on my own time, for the love of God, I keep on messing things up in terms of the forms of trying to able to aim for the glorious S rank run, especially noticeable on the Xbox 360 version, just because no matter what though, about the fact that I keep on losing sudden footing when it comes to like specific jumps I have to make. Whilst luckily on the PlayStation 3 version that you probably already know, whenever we get onto the results screen, as you saw, basically though, frame rate drops is non-existent, whilst unlike the Xbox 360 version, does have frame rate issues, so, which you probably already know about that. So, anyway, and as you can see, we now move on to Flame Core, where basically the entire level is pretty identical to the forms of the normal mode as well as hard mode, but the actual playstyle on very hard mode plays a little bit differently this time around, because we start the level off where we go inside the actual volcano, and later on in the second segment, something tells me we're about to go onto the outside portion of Flame Core. So it's a little bit interesting to say the least, especially noticeable because, like I said before, that in terms of the forms of very hard mode, that not only you can able to experience the actual identical level design as the forms of how it does on the previous difficulties, but it's also about the fact that you can able to experience the level backwards, enjoying in some stages anyway. So there might be a couple of exceptions here and there. To be more specifically, as soon as we're able to get onto the forms of not only Silver's very hard mode, but also with the forms of Shadow's very hard mode, which as a result, speaking of the forms of Shadow's very hard mode, suffice to say, I think I should probably save Shadow's very hard for last, because no matter what though, I think it's probably best able to save that particular topic until 2 weeks time, because as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that, well, when it comes to the forms of Sonic's very hard mode, I'm only going to be able to be focusing on 6 stages for today, whilst compared to the forms of the final 3 stages though, we'll save that up and join at some point on Friday, which as a result, you probably get the idea of what I was expecting to explain any of that, because as far as I'm aware is that I feel like that Sonic's very hard mode is not too shabby for the most part, because obviously with the broken gem abilities, as you probably already expect, although despite the fact that there's going to be a lot of times where frame rate is tends to get a little bit more buggier, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think it's possible for me to show off the forms of Knuckles' victory animation, because as far as I'm aware, the only time you can able to do this is by going into Flame Core, likely on not only on normal mode, but I think it's certainly possible on hard mode as well, because no matter what though, especially noticeable, that was the only method you can able to see Knuckles' victory animation, including his victory quotes, depending on what rank you get. So no matter what though, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for Knuckles anyway, because there is no way we can able to actually do the actual separate level as Knuckles, because no matter what though, it's about the fact that, yeah, you probably get the idea what I was expected to explain any of that. So, and also not to mention though, when it comes to the forms of extra variants for certain stages, in terms of the forms of, you know, forced to be play as, you know, certain amigos between Tails, Rouge, and Blaze, that when it comes to those stages in particular, very hard mode is non-existent in the forms of it not only extra Wave Ocean as Tails, but also with the forms of Blaze's Wave Ocean, and not to mention though, Tropical Jungle as Rouge, because no matter what though, yeah, that's as far as I can try to explain any of that. And I'm surprised about the fact that the last episode does not contain the very hard mode either. I'm guessing it's probably because, imagine if both hard mode in addition with very hard mode comes into play in very the end of the world level. My god, it'll be a nightmare though, especially noticeable because of the forms of too much warp holes you have to avoid and all that stuff, which, believe me, that'll be a nightmare if that'll be the case, unless if there's actually a mod out there to be existence. Well, that's besides the point. So, but as you can tell, I did somehow screwed up on that particular ramp here, because I will admit though, the collision detection on this little one ramp here, of which you saw familiar, is awful, which as a result, there are a couple of times when I did manage able to try to walk onto that particular ramp thing, no problem, during the course of any regular stage run, on normal mode anyway, enjoying forms of Sonic story, in addition with Shadow story as well, but jeez Louise, there might be a couple of times though, where basically the collision detection decides to screw you up at one point, which as a result, yeah, it just somehow forces me to go into the lava, and to make matters worse though, similar to the forms of how it does it in Volcano Valley level, enjoying forms of Sonic 3D Fleeky's Island, where do you remember about the fact that if you dare manage to get hit by a lot of lava environments, to be more specifically with lava hazards, during the forms of whenever you try to look after the whole bunch of flickies, and then one of those flickies will attempt able to hover around in the lava. Well, apparently though, if you dare touch the lava though, and if you manage able to stay on the lava, when you do manage to carry rings with you, basically what happens was though, the rings will attempt to able to go through the lava, which as a result, yeah, it's a bit of a nuisance though, especially, luckily you do have the invincibility frames with you, but it doesn't seem to last forever though, that's the only thing to able to keep an eye on for, so yeah, it's rather a nuisance though, when it comes to forms of, you know, some situations has to happen, so, but anywho, also, let's mention about the forms of another topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that now, Well, I've heard anyway that there's a game called Grounded is going to be releasing on Nintendo Switch at some point. Well, as a result, it's about the fact that it's going to contain only 3 gigabytes, which is much smaller than the forms of how it does it on 10 gigabytes from the likes of the Xbox Series X version. So, yeah, I can see why about the fact that there was actually a small space capacity for its memory storage. So, at least I was expecting for this much. So, anyway, speaking of which though, it's about the fact that until tomorrow, after this video releases, is that Freedom Planet 2 for multiple platforms is going to be releasing. So, still I'm looking forward to that though, but I'm sure enough that we'll let Coco Bandicoot will mention more about it if she decides able to finish up everything in Klonoa 2, Lunity's Veil portion of Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series from that point. So, yeah, that should be pretty exciting as far as this is concerned. So, also I just love the fact that, well, in Journey forms of Inflamed Core, the red gem is a godsend because obviously, you know, with this very annoying falling molten rocks that decides able to ambush you. Well, luckily, if you do manage to equip the red gem with you, this makes the entire stage a total cakewalk. Especially noticeable, you don't need to worry about getting hit anymore, unless if you're trying to able to equip the electric shield if you wanted to. But even then, no, as you can tell, we've somehow achieved yet another S rank. So that's 3 S ranks in a row so far, intensity forms of very hard mode in 3 stages so far. So, and as you can tell right there, we're now on to Radical Train, and I think we'll do one more level as it is, and because of that though, once we're done with that particular stage, then we'll move on to the last 3 Sonic's very hard stages, enjoying at some point, like I said before, until on Friday, which as a result, yeah, it should be pretty interesting, all things considered. So, yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What was your experience in intensity forms of very hard missions in Journey forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006? Because I would like to hear your thoughts. Because no matter what though, whenever I first played them, my goodness, the entire DLC itself is brutal. Like, extremely brutal as it is. Well, nothing even compares to forms of how it does it on Shadows very hard. Because my god, we have to go through so much busy work, which as a result, again, we'll explain more details about that if we get on to, let's just say, the halfway point in terms of April, as far as I'm usually concerned with this point. Although luckily for Sonic anyway, he's gonna have an easier time with that particular part itself worth noting for, because like I said before, the gem abilities are broken, which as a result, again, because of the forms of this unlimited usage of it, so... But anyway, speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog related though, out of nowhere, that it only happens in the American version, at least as far as I can gather, that apparently though, Amy Rose is getting a yet another cosmetic costume, and that's what appears to be something related to the forms of, let's just say, that it comes from IHOP, and as a result, IHOP Amy for Sonic Superstars is going to be a thing. And as a result, yeah, it's gonna be something to do with the forms of food related, so that's always something. So, and also not to mention though, is about the fact that until on Friday, speaking of Friday, as a matter of fact, it looks like that Tetris 99 is gonna be hosting the yet another Maximus Cup. And this time what appears to be based off from a theme of Princess Peach Showtime, which as a result, currently it's going to be on 39th Maximus Cup, which as a result, it's going to be insane of how much Maximus Cups is going to be addressed for the likes of Tetris 99, because usually, relatively speaking, knows that Tetris 99 has been around for a very long time actually, since in, I don't know, in 2019 or something. Mind you, I haven't exactly experienced Tetris 99 for myself. Well, that's just mainly because I'm no longer a master at Tetris, though, I must be honest here. But as you can see right there, I did some messed up on that Mark Speed section in Radical Train. Well, I was really hoping for a glorious S rank run, but of course, Mark Speed section decides to come in, and as a result, I keep on messing things up. Which, as a result, I blame on the forms of the momentum of that jump, which as a result, again, it's bad enough that you can't steer in midair, which it seems kind of archaic, at least as far as I can definitely tell. So, I suppose the final thing I want to mention about, I was still a little bit annoyed about the forms of the weather forecast recently, which as a result, yet again, we have to cope with more rain. I mean, it's just boring, which as a result, hopefully that the nice weather should come into play during at some point in the future. But either way, suffice to say, I think we should probably end things up at this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Instead, we'll move on to Tropical Jungle on very hard mode as Sonic. So this will be interesting. So I'll see you guys on Friday. Later, fellas.